This episode is brought to you by Anchor.fm. If you haven't heard of Anchor, you should definitely check them out. It's a super easy tool that anyone can use to create and distribute their podcast. It has everything you need, and you can do it all from your computer or even your phone. Need your podcast cover art? There's a tool. Music and sound effects? They have you covered. Want to record on the fly? It's easy with the app. Now you may be saying to yourself, I already have a podcast. No worries, just create your account, upload, and publish to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Looking for some walking around money? Anchor connects you with advertisers who match your brand. It's a one-stop shop for all of your podcasting needs. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Hello and welcome to BizQuik. I'm Corey.
And I'm Julie.
And today we have part 3 of You're Not Alone, a limited series on mental and financial wellness. We have all had a stressful year, and we've heard from so many people, not just small business owners, that they're at their breaking point.
This podcast series isn't just for small business owners. We truly believe that everyone can benefit from these conversations. In a year when so many have had challenge after challenge, we wanted to find a way to offer some help and hope.
We decided to reach out to our various networks to bring together a few experts that will hopefully help give you some advice and guidance on how to keep going. We believe in the never say quit entrepreneurial spirit, and these experts will provide insight through their knowledge or own experiences on ways to keep on moving forward.
This podcast is released every Saturday in the month of December and features a licensed therapist as well as business and financial experts telling their stories and giving advice on how to keep yourself sane.
On today's episode, we have Heather Vargo back on to continue the conversation on mental health. Heather is a clinical social worker and therapist in the Philadelphia area, and will spend her time with us today talking about toxic relationships, the effect this pandemic has had on our psyche, and resilience. If you haven't listened to the first episode in the series with Heather, we suggest you go back and do that.
Welcome back, Heather. I want to dive right in talking about what you're seeing from some of your clients in terms of relationships and how they're navigating through the difficulties with relationships right now, given everything that's happening in the world.
How do you balance that emotional uncertainty on top our own ambivalence, right? And feelings of uncertainty. And then when you kind of couple that with conflict, tension, with your family, your friends, people that I guess would be that, coupled with whether it's like tension, conflict, with relationships, like you're saying, people who aren't good at agreeing to disagree, right? People that, where I kind of see is like where you're dealing with people that are, maybe very controlling, very expressive, very verbal, maybe manipulative, overtly, covertly, and how I help my clients navigate that. But one of the things, that you see is that these kind of toxic relationships or whatever, contentious relationships tend to take up like 90% of our time, our energy, our resources, which only leaves 10% for actually like ourself or like other things that could be more restorative, other people, other interests, and I think shifting that from, really, you talk about not being like so touchy-feely, but I think you have to trust yourself. You have to learn to trust yourself, and I think of how do you feel when you're with this person? How do you feel when you're in this group, whatever it might be? And if you feel worse when you're with them than when you're then that might be something to think about adjusting, I think it's okay when we have our differences, right? If we can respect them and listen to each other and not feel so threatened when people don't agree with us. You know, I think that taps into like our own insecurities that people don't want to, they remember I was saying like getting comfortable with discomfort, you know, and if you're a racist or misogynist or, you know, a capitalist, I don't know, socialist, I don't know.
Just
like,
an ist, if you're an ist.
right?
Yeah.
And anything that's not that activates you, that says something about you.
I'm going to try, let's unpack that a little bit, because you put a lot out there for our listeners, and I want to hone in on the stressful relationships and how do people navigate that when it's so easy to just kind of be a jerk online to people, and B, your people are already feeling so isolated, so cutting someone out almost feels painful, even if that person just makes your life so much harder, or you have a really tough relationship with them.
Yeah, I want to clarify. I'm not saying cut them out. I'm saying like either cut out certain topics. Like we're not going to talk about politics. Like if you can't respect my differences, or if you know, like if you ever get the feeling, get the feeling when someone's like talking at you, right? And they're not really interested. They're not curious what you have to say. They're not engaged in like, they're not wanting to understand. They want to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to listen. I'm talking about those people, you know, where you just say like, if this isn't going to be a two-way street, because I kind of feel like I'm doing all the listening and like, or conceding or biting my tongue, and you're, you know, it's not reciprocated, then I say don't go to that person with that issue, you know?
Doesn't that put us at risk for, sometimes I feel like this is happening to me, where I'm so unwilling to engage in just like fighting with people. Like I don't want to debate it. Like I will have a healthy conversation with you, but I don't want an argument over it. Right. That you almost end up in your own like echo chamber, because all you're doing is surrounding yourself with people who have the same opinion as you, which almost makes it harder than to even see or hear opinions that are different than yours.
And just to kind of add to that, I mean, I think especially in today's day and age, so many people are their beliefs. Like they are their politics. They are their, you know, whatever it is, fill in a descriptor, and that's who they are. And they cannot get outside of that. So it's impossible to have a conversation, because it all somehow ends up back at that. You could be talking about the weather, and well, that's already divisive, because whether or not the climate's changing, like, you know, it's so hard to say anything because everything's so divisive these days.
So if you and I disagree about whether or not the climate's changing, then we're going to talk about the weather and not, you know, bring that up. But I think what, Julie, you're referring to is it limits the quality, or, you know, I think, of the relationship, right? I think, you know, Corey, what you're saying is people are their politics. You're talking about these values, right? I mean, I also believe a lot in science, and the fucking climate is changing. Like, so if you don't believe that, that's like you believing in creation and me believing in evolution. Like, I just don't even care that maybe you're not in my circle, to be honest with you. Like, I'm not interested in what you have to say anyway, maybe. Okay? Like, that's an option. I might be curious if you were, but if you're not, if you're more interested in just preaching or imposing or trying to, you know, convince me, then like, I'll take my chances with my echo chamber. But I don't really look at it that way. I look at it more of like people that are more interested in connecting with others versus wanting to be divisive or be right, or, you know, like be justified or entitled. You know, it's like if you want to connect with a loved one, then you want to understand their position and vice versa. And you should be able to have an open dialogue about that. And if people for their own reasons can't do that because it's too triggering for them, then that's their limitation. And sadly, that could limit the relationship. Yeah, it could. That's, why I think a lot of people would prefer to just kind of, not talk about it, right? Not think about it. And I think that's a different echo chamber. I mean, you get the people that just want to be in denial or want to just like agree to disagree or don't care, like that's, I mean, that's fine too. I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends what your values are, and I think if you're asking these questions and you're a curious person and you want to know what makes people tick, I do too. And when other people are maybe very limited in their mindset or rigid or not willing to have that open-mindedness or curiosity or willingness to, consider all possibilities, then I just see that as a limitation, and I think the thing I would say is don't take it personally. Don't take it personally, and try to find something else to connect on. If it's not politics or something else, like find something else, but it's hard when, humanity's at stake and other people are more worried about themselves. I mean, these are very divisive times.
And it's funny because I've got a relative, one of my uncles. He and I are on opposite sides of the aisle. Let's just say that. And he and I will argue all day long about politics. But at the end of the day, he's still my uncle. I'm still his nephew. We still love each other. And, he gets way more heated than I do. And but anyway, went to visit him and I told him one rule. I was like, no politics. And probably like 5 minutes into the conversation, politics came up. But, at the end of the day, it's like, all right, he gets all heated and then we, hug it out and then, go have dinner. So, I mean, I think that's a healthy way to do it in that, you're going to disagree and that's fine. But just remembering that there's more to that person than, their politics or whether or not that they believe that the earth is flat, which I believe we can all agree is ridiculous. But
right. I mean, this is your uncle, right, that you've known your whole life. So I'm sure you have a lot more to connect with him about other than that limited subject, I think it's interesting that he prefers to argue about it, or that he gets more heated, and I wonder if that's because he's struggling with the fact that you disagree with him.
I think he's just argumentative in nature, and that's just a part of his personality. I mean, we spent the entirety of my brother's wedding reception arguing about the Audubon Society, I believe, years ago. So that's just who he is.
So I think your uncle's, for him, that's a way of connecting.
Yeah.
So like debating for him is a way of connecting, so as long as it's, again, something you don't take too personally or too, that it's just, like he likes a good intellectual debate. Like that's kind of how he likes to challenge himself and how he likes to connect with others.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. And, we've talked a lot about politics so far today and how divisive that can be and tough on relationships. And then we've got this whole other thing of, COVID, which at many points becomes incredibly political as well, where there's people who, I think everyone believes COVID's a thing, but not you either believe it's much more manageable than we're being led to believe, or that it's, much worse, right? So COVID in itself is a very divisive conversation. The whole concept of masks and vaccinations and everything, all of it. It's divisive. It's been a very, very tough year. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on the long-term impacts of this year on basically the psyche of this country, right? The people, like small business owners, have been decimated. And it started with COVID, and it just doesn't seem to be ending. And, that's typically who our podcast is for, though this particular series is for everybody. But when you think about, COVID and being isolated in this really horrible political year that we've been through, and small business owners losing their businesses and people going broke and relationships just fracturing everywhere, like what are the long-term impacts that we're looking at for people, and what can people do to start to shift to have a more positive outlook on 2021, when I know everybody's super stoked about 2021 coming, but I don't know what's going to change on January 1st besides we're going to have a new year and a new month on the calendar.
So I think COVID actually is a really good example of, a divisive subject similar to politics, in that it really kind of need to agree to disagree sometimes, right? Where some people are taking extreme measures and huge precautions, right? Like I have clients that are literally on lockdown, haven't left their house. And then I have clients that are taking very few precautions, if any. I see all the range, right? And where it's especially divisive is when the people who are comfortable with the one want to see the other who are not comfortable with that, right? And that kind of a thing, right? So it's kind of similar in that, like, if we have a strong relationship and a good connection, and you respect me, and I can say, look, like, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe. I love you, but I can't see you over Thanksgiving. I hope you can appreciate that. And you don't understand and you don't agree, but yet you can accept that and know that, this is temporary and that we will, then long term, I think it'll be fine. I think where long-term trauma or divisive issues impact us long term is when there's not a way back, right? Like if I've lost my job or my identity or a loved one, and I'm never going to get that back, that's grief, that's loss, that's a whole other process of finding your way back, to a new version of yourself, if you will, or a new normal. But if you have good support, if you have enough resources, if you have enough, going for you, I think in the end, look, we're resilient people, right? Like our brains are designed to protect us and heal. We want to heal. We don't want to be stuck in this. It's why this is so hard. We don't like ambivalence. I think long term, what could happen is that we get better at it, which is kind of what I talk a lot about, of how to cope with the now, not knowing what will be. But I think a good indication of how you're going to come out of this is how you've come out of things that were really hard before. Are you gritty? Do you get, do you do what you need to do? Do do you figure it out? Do you find a way? Or are you more inclined to look elsewhere for blame, or find feel helpless and struggle to get help. I don't know. I think it depends on the person and on their ability to pick themselves up after they've been knocked down, really. Like, that's what you're talking about resilience. And luckily these are skills that can be taught, but a lot of it's learned. A lot of it is just, it's kind of history.
So you had a right there at the end interesting kind of point, that a topic that I love to talk about, but the resilient people out there, the gritty people, I feel like they're already set up mentally to bounce back, to survive this. They've pivoted their business, they've figured something out, like they've made their way through this on their own, or with friends and family, their network, whatever it is. But it's the people who have that, what I like to call the victim mentality, where this is, they blame everybody else except for themselves. They blame the world for their shortcomings, and there may be some truth to that, but I think that this pandemic really brought that out in a lot of people, because they're like, everybody just wanted to be the victim, and now we can all commiserate over the fact that we've been on lockdown and the economy's in the in the shitter, etc.
Yeah, I think initially there was a lot of support in the whole we're all in this together, right? Where I started to see some division, if you will, is when things started to open up again, and like the numbers were good, and people, like myself, were pivoting and doing things that they enjoyed. Well, some of them just very carefully or in a different way, and other people weren't. Like, they didn't feel like they could, for whatever reason. Like, they had the reasons, right? Like, they just weren't able to. And you talk about social media, I think that was really hard for people to see others like kind of going on, living their lives when they felt like they couldn't. So no longer did it feel like we're in it together. I think that was tough. Yeah, I think for people who are, I just had a request from a client who is one of those people who doesn't have like any family really, or very limited support, and is kind of in lockdown, like wants more options in terms of like group or social support for people, who are, probably going to be doing this through spring. I don't know. I guess I would look for where you can pivot. I really think that what you're saying, Corey, is that this, the pandemic and everything else has really kind of brought out the people who, are capable or very good at adapting, versus the people who really struggle with that ability to find that self-reliance, if you will,
Yep. I think this was definitely a year to see who was going to separate themselves and come out of this stronger, who sat down, got to work, and really made some positive changes, versus those who decided not to do anything. Or, I relate this story because it made me laugh so much. It says so much about how much of a overachiever I may or may not be. But I was having a call. I was on a phone call with a friend that I haven't seen in, I don't know, a couple of years. And I was telling her, she's like, this was in like mid to late August. And she's like, so what have you been up to, since the pandemic hit? And I'm like, well, I moved to Richmond, and, we started a company, and we wrote a book, and we're starting a podcast, and I'm training for this event, and we created our own relay anyway. And I like list off all these things. And in my head, I'm like, there has to be more. I know I've done more. What else have I done? Because it's like 6 months. What else have I done? And she said, oh my, I've literally only gotten out of my pajamas like 4 times in the last 5 months. And I thought, well, there you have it. So, typically they would refer to like from Thanksgiving to like New Year's as separation season for most people, where you got those people who put their foot on the gas and they're like, go, go, go. And you've got everybody else who like decides to, go deep on the cookies and the pies and like taking time off from work and let's celebrate. And there's two different kinds of people. This whole year has been a separation season, really. And with that, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to take a quick break while Rachel Martin from Forward Motion Events fills us in on what she's got going on this winter.
Hey, I'm Rachel, and I'm here to tell you about the Women's Winter Experience to help you get through this winter. It's 3 months and 3 challenges. Each month, you will choose your challenge and get sent an awesome swag package. So if you are looking to stay motivated mentally and physically and want help accomplishing your goals, then you need to check out our Women's Winter Experience.
Thanks, Rachel. And now we're going to get back to this show. But one quick note for you guys out there listening, you might want to tell the ladies in your life about what Rachel's got going on. All right, welcome back from the break. Have you been recommending or have you been seeing people getting pets?
Oh yes, I am happy to write anyone a letter if it will help them get a service animal. I think anyone can benefit from a pet of any kind, really. For lots of reasons, but there's definitely science that shows that having, it doesn't even have to be an animal, but having other things to take care of can really improve your mental health for sure.
I'm not gonna lie, my thoughts on the validity of service animals just went down a little bit when you said that you're happy to write letters for anybody. Like
there's no requirements right now. You don't need any certifications whatsoever to be able to do it. So the only people I've written for are like landlords, but hey, definitely.
Got it. So that people can get pets where they're not supposed to have them.
Yeah. I even had a client who was like currently, his wife got a PFA against him. Totally fabricated the story. Anyway, he was in a hotel, couldn't bring his dog with him, but I was able to like get him access to have it temporarily. Yeah, because it's stressful to be apart from your animal during a time when you're going through trauma.
Absolutely. Pets certainly help. They take your focus off yourself and put it on something else. And
yeah, and there's that unconditional, well, I guess maybe if not cats, but dogs typically. I don't know.
Yeah, cats are terrible.
Cats are funny. I've seen like the cats really are very curious. They come right up when I have my clients who are doing they come right up to the screen and they ignore them all day long, but as soon as they're unavailable, the cats like won't leave them alone. It's pretty funny. Yeah.
I want to go back to when we were talking about the victim mentality and all of that. When right before that you said that it's possible to teach resilience.
Yeah.
Like to teach that, how does that work?
Another word for the victim mentality is a phrase called learned helplessness, honestly. And what it refers to is like a lack of agency, like a lack of feeling like you have ownership or accountability or influence in your life. A lot of my clients where they grew up with, say, really controlling parents, and they weren't able to make decisions themselves, or like they're not always good at knowing what they think or feel, let alone asserting it. But things that can really help when you're feeling this powerlessness or helplessness is movement. One of the ways we teach resilience is really like through learning, right? Through doing, through experiencing. And so like the way you can kind of retrain your brain, if you will, that I I just finished the book Untamed. Julie, have you listened to that?
I have
So
not. I have
good.
it, but I've not listened to it.
So good. You should listen to it. So I think it's Reese Witherspoon who's narrating it, I think.
Okay.
But in the book, she's like, we can do hard things. We can do, it's like, I can sit with this discomfort, and not have to fix it for somebody. Or I can make myself shower or get out of bed or get out of my pajamas because, I know this is what's going to help my brain transition from morning to afternoon to night to the, you know what I mean? Like those kinds of things is like where I can force myself to do things that I know logically are going to make me feel better.
Yeah. So I have two comments on that. The first one is that I think one of the best ways that I could recommend for people to learn to do hard things, which by the way, I want to say that's what she said every time I say that, but what is to take a look at Andy Frisella's 75 Hard program. That entire program, a lot of people think it's a fitness program. It's not. It's designed to help you build resilience. It toughens you up. I don't know anybody who's done it who hasn't come out on the other side and they are completely transformed. It's an amazing program.
And I know like you love that. Like that's like that to me would be like way too hard.
But it doesn't have to be hard. It's literally doing 5 tasks every day. And I know there's 2 workouts and like one of them is outside and one of them should be inside, but that second one can also be outside. But it's really just a matter of the commitment to doing things, even when you don't feel like doing it. But it's not saying like go lift weights or run 5 miles. It's literally just doing walk.
In my world, it's like showing up on the mat, right? Like, so, like 30 days of yoga, like a thing where like every day whether you feel like it or not, right? Like you show up, you make the time and you tune in and you know what I mean? Like that kind of a thing. Like whatever the discipline is.
Yeah. Just doing it, showing up and doing it, committing to
it consistently then lays the pathways, in our brains where it's available and accessible to us during hard times. And now we're in some really hard times. And that's why you're seeing this division, because those of us that have been doing this or have since really stepped up and employed more of this during this time, it's available to us, it's accessible to us. Those of us who haven't had the ability or the opportunity, to do it, it's not available, it's not accessible. It can be taught, but like I said last time, I mean, it's not a switch, it's not a magic pill. Like you got to show up and you got to put in the effort, otherwise like it ain't gonna happen.
Well, and I think for a lot of those people, it's just starting off small. Like you said, like I'm going to get out of my pajamas today. And I mean, this was years ago. I had the same shopping schedule as this one lady. And so every Thursday morning at like 10 a.m., I was at the grocery store and I would see her and she was always wearing pajama pants and slippers. And I'm like, you don't have enough self-respect to just put on some regular clothes, just make it to the grocery store. I guarantee she has not changed out of her pajamas this entire time. She's already wearing them to the grocery store. So those little things like, and that's the, it's like, I'm going to, whatever it is. And I think that for those people, having a pet is also, a key part of that, because it puts you on that routine. You have to feed them.
Yeah. It forces you, and it forces you to have to do it. Like a lot of people I see struggle with self-compassion, right? They're really hard on themselves. They really hate themselves if they can't get out of their pajamas, some of them, and but they have a lot of compassion for others, right? Like they'll do it for their animals if they won't do it for themselves, or they'll do it for their kids if they won't do it for themselves, so those are, if you can find a reason, and it doesn't really matter what gets you there. I mean, what will keep you there ultimately will be the fulfillment that you feel from it, but whatever gets you there, take advantage of it.
Yeah, I keep thinking back to like last February when I had driven back to Minnesota to empty out my storage unit and move stuff to the East Coast because I still, had stuff scattered all over the country. I still do. But anyway, I had reached out to a friend because I knew she wasn't working to ask her. Well, actually, I didn't know she wasn't working. I reached out to a friend to ask her if I could store something at her house in Minnesota because I needed a few things to stay in Minnesota. And she messaged me back and had said that she couldn't take my call because she was in a really bad place and didn't want me to see how bad off she was, and that she was embarrassed, right? And this is a friend who, I've known her for years, but she graduated with my youngest brother. And I remember a long time ago, and I believe you taught me this, Heather, is that when you are really, really stuck in the suck, that one of the best things you can do is to help someone else, right? And so I messaged her back and said that I understood and that I wasn't going to be disappointed in her, but that I really needed help. And I was hoping that she could help me, but I understood if she couldn't. And she spent the next 5 days helping me every day, all day long. And I did need the help. I could have asked a lot of people to help me, but she needed to help me more than I needed her to help me. And it literally changed her entire attitude. And she was so much better by the time the week was over. I'm not saying I cured her of anything, but she was able to get out of her own way and help someone else. And I think there's probably an important message in there for a lot of people right now who are feeling really, really stuck or just in it. Go help someone else.
Or if you know someone like that, maybe you could try to employ their help with no strings attached, just like you did, because I think it's really hard for people to ask for help. So if you're someone who's not, where that's, you're good at that, and if she can't help you, you have other people that you can ask, but she could really use someone to help. There are people that really do require other people for healing, and they're often the people that isolate themselves the most, so if back to kind of what can people do? I mean, if you're one of the lucky ones that are in a relatively good place, mental health wise, you're one of the resilient ones, and your loved ones are struggling, maybe reach out, right? Even if it's just letting them know, even if it's just a text, again, no strings attached. They can reply, they cannot reply, not gonna hurt my feelings. It means a lot to them,
Agreed.
And I believe that's a great way to end the podcast. We are out of time here, but wanted to thank you again, Heather. And of course, if anybody wants to reach out to Heather or, learn more about what she does, you can check them out in the show notes. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you so much
Heather.
for having me anytime. All right. Be well.
Thanks again to all of our listeners and our expert, Heather Vargo, for all of the great advice today. Check the show notes to learn more about Heather and her practice, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Our contact info is in the show notes as well.
We have one more episode in the series, which will be released next Saturday, the 26th. If you'd like to hear more of our business-focused podcast, head on over to bizquikpodcast.com. You can also visit our company's website at sbpace.com to learn more about us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for tuning in.